So most of the stocks you hear Tyler and I talk about, you're probably pretty familiar with. In recent videos, we've talked about some of the largest real estate companies in the world. We talk about some of the big energy companies. We talk about Berkshire Hathaway a lot. Companies that are not necessarily household names, but things you've heard of. But we, and especially Tyler, have a portfolio full of stocks that some of which you probably haven't heard of. I had to kind of dig through mine a little bit, but I know Tyler has a lot more to choose from. And
I should
Tyler has
start
one that
start
I'm
a
curious to
newsletter.
hear.
I should start a newsletter called Obscure Stock Quarterly or something like that.
I'd be a subscriber. So what's one that like you think investors should put on their radar?
All right, so we're gonna go south of the border here. You ever been traveled to Mexico? Ever flown to Cancun?
No, I've been there on a boat though.
Okay. Well, the Cancun airport is beautiful, and guess what? The person that operates that is publicly traded. That is Grupo Aeroportuario del Sureste. Excuse my Spanish pronunciation, but basically Southeast Airport Group. The Mexican airport industry is kind of divided up into three separate companies, and this particular one happens to own the Cancun airport and several of them in the southeast portion of the of Mexico. Think around like the Yucatan Peninsula and places like that, and also has the operating license for about six in Colombia as well, because this is a popular model that's kind of taking root in South America. So the idea being basically they are offered a 99-year concession from the Mexican government to operate these buildings or the airport. So they're kind of something between like a toll booth business and a real estate investment trust, because on the toll booth side, they basically get parking fees and landing fees and takeoff fees and basically anything associated with an airport, they get a fee. It's a very stable business, and companies or the airports in Mexico that have a lot of international flights get much, much higher fee rates for those international departures and arrivals than domestic ones. So the Southeast airport with Cancun and actually the Pacific one with Cabo San Lucas, those two are the most profitable airports in all of Mexico, right? Well, you have that, and then basically any real estate improvements that they make to the airports, so any of the shopping, any of the restaurants, basically any money that you would make developing the airport itself, they get to take that as well. So you have two relatively stable businesses with no competition, right? Like they're the only game in town when it comes to owning airports in Mexico is these three companies, and they have geographic monopolies. And even though it's a great business, it's a pretty steady business, maybe a little sensitive to discretionary spending if Americans stop going to Cancun as much. But at the same time, right now trades for about 11 times free cash flow. So great business trading, and I think a very attractive valuation.
And what's the ticker symbol for that one, by the way?
Yeah, ASR. It's a American Depository Share on the New York Stock Exchange.
Okay, easier to invest in than some international companies that I know are on your radar. So I'm going to go a little bit less obscure. Mine's an insurance business, and when you think insurance, you probably think companies like MetLife and Aflac and things like that. Mine's called Kinsale Capital. Ticker symbol is KNSL. It's a company that I've talked about a few times, and it's a specialty insurer. If you're not familiar, a specialty insurer, it's also called excess and surplus in insurance language. These companies insure difficult to place risks, very risky businesses, and things like that other insurance companies generally won't touch. So, for example, if Tyler were to start a demolitions business, where chances are someone's going to get hurt at some point, a typical business liability insurance company might not want to touch that, but Kinsale would be happy to have him as a client. If I wanted to open a marijuana dispensary, that's a new industry. It's very tough to gauge risk and things like that. Most insurance companies wouldn't want to go near me, but that's a big part of Kinsale's business these days. So this model is very tough to do, which is why a lot of insurers won't touch these things, but it can also be very, very lucrative if you're good at it. Kinsale is the only company that is a pure play on specialty insurance. Some of the big players participate in this. Markel, which I follow very closely, is one of the big players. I think Lloyd's Group is the biggest specialty insurer in the country or in the world. Kinsale has about a little over 1% of the market. They focus on smaller and medium-sized accounts that are, the big players don't really focus on. And it's been a very good strategy so far. Most people don't realize this about the insurance business, but most insurers are happy to make their money off of investments and roughly break even on underwriting. They invest what's called the float, the money that's been paid in as premiums but hasn't been paid out for claims, and generally invested in things like, treasury bonds, high yield corporate securities, things like that, and generate income that way. The average insurer has what's called a combined ratio of 96.5%, which is all the expenses of their business. If that's under 100%, that means their underwriting is profitable. So the average insurer has an underwriting margin of about 3.5%. Kinsale's combined ratio in 2022 for the last full year was 78.5%. That means before you even look at their investment performance, their underwriting profit margin is about 21.5%, several times greater than the average insurer. Again, very, very lucrative business because there's not a ton of competition for these types of accounts. Very, very lucrative if you're good at it. So they're one of the best in the business. The proof is in the numbers. Kinsale is roughly 7x for shareholders in the past 5 years because they've done a great job of executing on their model. Relatively young company. They started around 2010, 2009. And just a great momentum so far. It doesn't look like it's slowing down anytime soon. I think there's a lot of room to grow here. It's still a relatively small company despite the great record of performance. Once again, thank you so much for joining me. Be sure to click subscribe if you don't subscribe to my channel already. And as always, this video is sponsored by The Motley Fool. Be sure to visit www.fool.com/Frankel to receive the top 10 best stocks to buy now.